Question 3 in section B. A Victorian company that provides cloud storage services to manufacturers of wearable medical devices has been approached by an Australian university. The university would like to access the stored data for research purposes. Discuss the possible legal consequences for the company of providing its stored data to the Australian University. In your response, refer to the Privacy Act 1988 and Health Records Act 2001. I always confuse that with 2011. My fault. So, the first thing to do here is let's quickly define these two acts. So I would start off by saying something like the Privacy Act 1988 is an overarching federal law for all of us of Australia that includes companies that collect health. Read that health data. Let's say. Actually, I could change the line spacing on this. Maybe I'll just do that. So the Privacy Act 1988 is an overarching federal law for all of Australia that includes companies that collect health data. So it's not just for anyone, or it's not just for people that don't collect health data. It includes collecting health data as well. The Health Records Act, though, the Health Records Act of 2001 is applies to Victorian businesses who collect health-related data for use that has been consented, if that makes sense. So the people who are handing the data over know what's happening with that data, especially with health data. You don't want to be handing health data over like your personal information about your, what makes you sick or what you're allergic to if you don't know what that data is being used for. So the complication here is this Australian university. So the Australian university is going to be bound by the Privacy Act. So I would add that here. The uni is, I'm just going to freehand here because we're just doing an example here. I'm not saying that this question would need to be worded exactly like this, but so just bear that in mind when I'm typing, and ignore my typos. The uni is going to be bound by the Privacy Act 1988 and the Victorian company will also be bound to the Health Records Act, which it won't allow them, even though the Australian university wants to have access to those health records of that Victorian company. Those people who have agreed to that, giving their health records to that Victorian company, they haven't necessarily agreed to having their data being used for research purposes in another company, even though they're still in Australia. So there's an issue there. So the uni is going to be bound by the Privacy Act, and the Victorian company will also be bound to the Health Records Act, which won't allow them to share data with the uni because their customers have not agreed to it. And for it to happen, you would need to get everyone's permission, which, let's say you have, it's like saying everybody that bought an Apple Watch, now everyone who bought that watch, I need to approach all of them again and ask them if they will consent to me sharing their information with another company. It's just not feasible, because you'd have to go through thousands, if not millions, of people who are around the globe who've got that watch in that case, and it would be similar in this case. So it's not going to happen. And if the Victorian company does share the data with the uni, then they may be subject to serious fines. We're not going to say here that they're going to be, the cops are going to rock up at their door and they're going to be put in handcuffs, or we don't know exactly, because you would have to go to court, and the court would have to go through the whole situation and make a judgment, and probably either give her a fine, or if it's super serious, maybe someone might be accountable and go to jail. I don't know. But you're not going to say. You just say in general that they would be subject to fines or serious fines. And that's about it. So the Privacy Act 98 is the overarching federal law of Australia that includes companies that collect health data, The Health Records Act 2001 applies to Victorian businesses who collect health-related data for use that has been consented in Victoria. The uni is going to be bound by the Privacy Act, and the Victorian company will be bound to the Health Records Act, which won't allow them to share the data with the uni because their customers have not agreed to it, because they're doing something else with it. They want to do some research, store data for research purposes. So if the Victorian company does share the data with the uni, then they may be subject to serious fines and be in trouble legally somehow. I would say it's only worth 3 marks. I wouldn't go on any more than that. Let's have a look what the report says. Question 3. Students were awarded marks for discussing the consequences of providing stored medical data to a university and for referring the context to which the Privacy Act and the Health Records Act in Victoria. Although many students were able to write a general statement about the scenario breaching both acts, few were able to explain the implications of the different acts on the scenario. Many students also made incorrect statements in relation to consequences. For example, they could go to jail, or they could get in trouble with the police. See, this is what we were talking about before. So here's an example of a high-scoring response. The Privacy Act 98 is a federal law that can apply to organisations that collect health data. It's basically what we said, exactly the same. This law would also apply to the university if it were given access to the data. Yes, so this law would also apply to the university if they were given access to the. Yes, it would. Of course, it would. We didn't actually mention that, so that might be. I don't know how they go about marking ours though. The Health Act 2001 is a Victorian law that requires data to be collected only for the stated purpose unless separate consent is obtained. So that's basically what we said also. Given the company would only have access to the data for the purpose of providing the service of wearable devices, they would need to gain consent from each user of each wearable device in order to provide this data to the university. So this is exactly what we were talking about before. This is impractical, so they could not provide the data to the university, even if it was de-identified. A possible legal consequence might be fines. So there you go. So they didn't crap on about the cops are going to come, or whatever. They just said they might be eligible for fines. So that's it. Again, it's only worth 3 marks, so I wouldn't spend any more time on that.